Well, hello masters of the web and welcome to this latest video. In this video we're going to look at something very contentious, and I'm expecting to have lots of up and down votes and all sorts of things because there are people who are evangelical about various editors and IDEs to use when programming. And you'll get all sorts of advice. You'll get people telling you that you have to use a particular editor. It's the best thing since sliced bread. You'll get people telling you that the editor you use is absolutely terrible, and everything in between. So I thought I would just look at very quickly at what you should use yourself and give you some ideas of what I use and why I use them. Now, first of all, if you're working for a company, you have to use the editor which that company, or the IDE which that company actually provides. You don't have a choice. But at home, working for yourself, then you can choose whichever one suits you best. And that is the important thing. It's the editor or the IDE which suits your style of programming, your style of working best. Okay? And that is the nub. That is the absolute most important point. I mean, for example, to give you a good example, okay, if you wanted to fly from here to Australia, you wouldn't use a submarine. You'd use an aeroplane, because that's the best thing for you to use to fly from here to Australia. Now, both items, a submarine and an aeroplane, can get from here to Australia. No problem. It can do it. Okay? It just does it in different ways. It depends on how you want to do it. If you want to be quiet, unobserved, and do it unobtrusively, you can use the submarine. If you want to get there quickly, then you'd use the aeroplane. Okay? So editors and IDEs are very much dependent on what you want to do, how you want to do it, and the way you want to do it. Okay? So my simple piece of advice is there is only one good IDE or editor, and that's the one that you like the best. Not which anybody else likes the best, which you like the best. Okay, let's have a quick look at the editors and IDEs that I use. Okay, now editors, I use Atom. Now, Atom will tell you it's an IDE. Well, not really. It's an editor which you can turn into an IDE by adding plugins, and there are thousands and thousands of plugins for Atom on all sorts of things, and it becomes very close to being an IDE, depending on which plugins you add. But of course, you have to spend a lot of time researching the plugins. You have to spend a lot of time deciding if that particular plugin is right for you, that it works correctly. For example, you can add plugin Atom Live Server as a plugin, and then when you try and use PHP, it doesn't work. It only works for HTML. Bit of a problem. Okay, so you then have to try a different plugin, the PHP server plugin. This type of thing. You've got these sorts of problems. Okay, so it isn't really an IDE, but I use it. It's a phenomenally good text editor, and I have a number of plugins I use with it, which make it excellent for producing HTML sites very quickly and very easily. I can also use it for PHP, for example, and JavaScript and so on, but it's a little bit more convoluted if I want to actually see the output on the screen on on a browser. Okay, so which is next? Oops, other way. Visual Studio Code. Now this is another free editor. It's very much like Atom, and it has people who tell you that it's the best thing since sliced bread. I also use it. Yep, I do. Again, it has a lot of plugins, very similar to those of Atom, and it is very, very good. I'm not going to say it isn't. Now, I do tend to use Atom more, and I'll use Atom to write bash scripts and that type of thing, and edit bash scripts and other text files which I might have on my Linux system, whereas I won't usually use Visual Studio Code to do that. Okay. Next is Sublime Text. Now this is the daddy. The other two are free. Sublime Text is not free. You can try it for free, but if you decide you like it, then and you're going to use it, then you should buy it. Now there's nothing to force you to buy it, but if you use something then which is not free, then it's my opinion that you should pay for it. It's as simple as that. How would you like it if you created something and people just, which you sold, and people were just using it for free? You wouldn't like it, so I'm sure they don't. So those are the ones I use. Sublime Text I don't actually use. I have looked at it, I have trialed it, but I don't actually use it. So Atom is the one I tend to use, simply because it's very easy to use. Visual Studio Code is excellent, and if it works the way you want it to, then there's no reason why you shouldn't use it. Sublime Text, you do have to pay for it, and the idea of this whole series is for things that you don't have to pay for. Okay, let's have a look at IDEs. IDEs. Now, what's the difference between an editor and an IDE? Well, an editor is exactly that. It'll edit text, and you can have plugins to make it do more things. An IDE out of the box will actually do a lot more for you. It's a debugger. It has integrated debugging facilities. It will usually have an integrated server of some sort. It will have support for multiple languages, usually, not always, but it usually will have support for multiple languages. And you'll find that, for example, you might be using PHP, and it will automatically be able to show PHP in the server. You don't have to have a different server, a different browser to look at and things like that. It'll also, usually an IDE will also allow you to configure and set up databases from within the IDE and that type of thing, and all of this comes as standard within the IDE. The IDE which I use, oops, wrong way, is Netbeans. Now Netbeans is free. The current version is 8.2. It's moving home from Oracle to Apache, and Apache now has Netbeans 9. Unfortunately, this is only available for Java at the moment. So until they actually get Netbeans 9 for everything, I would avoid Netbeans 9 and put Netbeans 8.2 on. Okay, as I say, it's totally free. There are plugins again for it if you wish, to make it better, even more better. Is that really? Yes, even more better. Okay, so that's Netbeans, but there are others. So you also have Eclipse, which is an excellent free IDE as well, and you have Aptana Studio, which is built on Eclipse. So basically it's the same thing, but it's it uses the same base IDE on that. And then, oops, okay, and then after that, mainly it's paid for IDEs. You've got the Visual Studio from Microsoft, but most of them will only tend to work on one or two languages, not on all of them, whereas, as I say, the ones that I've shown you here will work on Windows, it will work on Linux, and it will work on a Mac. Okay, so the answer is which is best. Now, personally, if I'm developing, I will use Netbeans. Okay, if I'm actually developing a full-blown project which has database, that type of thing, I will use Netbeans. If I'm writing a quick site that is just HTML and CSS and doesn't use PHP, then I'll use a text editor. So it very much depends what I'm doing. If it's a more complex site, I'll use an IDE. If it's a less complex site, I'll use an editor. And remember, you use the one that suits you best. Okay? And there'll be a lot of peer pressure to say, oh, you've got to use this, and oh, you've got to use that, and what you're using is rubbish. It's not, okay? It's what suits you best. Okay? Sorry I can't give you definitive. These are the ones that I've looked at, and the ones I use most are, as I say, Atom for text editing and very quick sites, and Netbeans for complex sites. I hope that's helped you a little bit. My name's John, and I'll see you next time.